She was the most famous woman in the world. A goddess on screen. A symbol of beauty and desire that transcended borders and languages. But behind the platinum hair and the breathless voice, behind the fame and the magazine covers and the adoring crowds, Marilyn Monroe carried a secret so explosive it could have destroyed the most powerful political dynasty in America. A secret about a pregnancy, an abortion, FBI surveillance files, and a child who was never born. This is the story they didn't want you to know. The story that allegedly got Marilyn Monroe killed. The story that remained buried in classified documents for over 60 years until declassified FBI files began to surface, revealing fragments of a truth so dangerous that it threatened the presidency itself. This is about power and vulnerability, about a woman caught between her heart and the machine of American politics, about a baby that powerful men decided could never exist. It's 1960. America stands at the edge of a new era. The old guard is fading. A young, charismatic senator named John Fitzgerald Kennedy is campaigning for the presidency, bringing youth and vigor and the promise of Camelot to a nation ready for change. His beautiful wife Jackie stands beside him, the picture of grace and sophistication. They are America's golden couple, destined for greatness. But behind the campaign smiles and the carefully orchestrated photo opportunities, JFK is living a double life. Multiple affairs. Reckless encounters. A pattern of behavior so brazen that even his closest advisors worry about the political consequences. And then there's Marilyn. 34 years old in 1960. At the absolute peak of her fame and simultaneously falling apart. She's just finished filming Some Like It Hot, a performance so brilliant it should have won her an Oscar. But Hollywood still doesn't take her seriously. They see the blonde bombshell, not the artist. They see the sex symbol, not the woman who studies at the actor's studio, who reads Dostoevsky, who desperately wants to be respected for her craft. Her marriage to playwright Arthur Miller is crumbling. The intellectual union she hoped would legitimize her is dying under the weight of disappointment on both sides. She's lonely, vulnerable, taking pills to sleep and pills to wake up and drinking to numb the pain of never feeling good enough. The affair between Marilyn and JFK allegedly began years earlier, in 1954 at a Hollywood gathering. She was still married to Joe DiMaggio, the baseball legend who loved her possessively and jealously. JFK was a young senator with presidential ambitions and a wandering eye. They connected instantly according to multiple sources. The attraction was magnetic. But more than that, they understood each other in ways their spouses couldn't. Both were performing versions of themselves for public consumption. Both hid pain and insecurity behind carefully constructed personas. Both were more complex than the world wanted them to be. Over the years, even as they remained married to other people, the relationship allegedly continued in secret. Stolen moments. Hotel rooms registered under fake names. A network of enablers and fixers who arranged meetings and kept secrets. Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law and a member of the Rat Pack, reportedly served as intermediary, offering his Santa Monica beach house for clandestine encounters. Frank Sinatra allegedly helped facilitate meetings. A whole infrastructure existed to protect JFK's image while allowing him to indulge his appetites. Early 1960. Marilyn begins filming Let's Make Love with French actor Yves Montand. The film is a romantic comedy about a billionaire who falls for a beautiful actress. Art imitates life as Marilyn and Montand begin an affair on set. He's married to the legendary French actress Simone Signoret, but that doesn't stop him. Marilyn, still technically married to Arthur Miller though they're living separately, falls hard for Montand. She believes he might leave his wife for her. She believes this might be real love, something stable and lasting. But Montand is using her, enjoying the conquest of betting the world's most famous sex symbol. When filming ends, he returns to his wife without a second thought, leaving Marilyn devastated and humiliated. But according to explosive claims and recently declassified FBI files and investigative reports, something else was happening during this period. Marilyn was still seeing JFK. The affair had never really ended. And sometime during the filming of Let's Make Love, Marilyn Monroe became pregnant. The timing was crucial. JFK had just secured the Democratic nomination in July 1960. He was months away from the presidential election. Nothing could be allowed to derail his path to the White House. Nothing. Photos taken in July 1960 would later fuel speculation about Marilyn's condition. She was in New York for hair and makeup tests for what would be her final film, The Misfits. Images from that period allegedly show her with a slightly rounded belly, a subtle fullness that wasn't typical of her usually carefully maintained figure. Some dismissed it as weight gain or the camera angle or the natural curves she was famous for. But others looked at those photos and saw something else. A baby bump. Early pregnancy. Evidence of a secret that would change everything. According to various sources who claim knowledge of the situation, Marilyn knew she was pregnant. And she knew the baby wasn't Eve Montan's despite their recent affair. She knew it wasn't Arthur Miller's though they were still technically married. She knew whose child she was carrying. John F. Kennedy's. The man who was about to become the most powerful person in the world. The man who couldn't afford a scandal of this magnitude. The man who had made her believe at some point in their years-long entanglement that there might be a future for them. Imagine what must have gone through Marilyn's mind when she realized she was pregnant. This woman who had suffered multiple miscarriages in her previous marriages. This woman who desperately wanted to be a mother, who talked often about her desire for children, who saw motherhood as the one role that might finally make her feel complete and legitimate. She was carrying a baby. Finally. After all the losses and the medical complications and the fears that she might never have children. But the father was the future president of the United States. A married man. A Catholic. A man whose family's political ambitions depended on maintaining a pristine public image. What did she hope for in those early weeks of pregnancy? Did she fantasize that JFK would leave Jackie for her? Did she imagine they would find a way to be together, to raise this child, to build a life beyond the secrecy in the hotel rooms and the careful arrangements? Or did she know deep down that this pregnancy was a catastrophe for everyone involved? That powerful forces would mobilize to eliminate this problem before it could destroy the Kennedy dynasty? Sources claim Marilyn broke the news to Kennedy around the time he secured the Democratic nomination in July 1960. Imagine that conversation. The most famous actress in the world telling the future president she's carrying his child. JFK, whose political handlers already worried constantly about his extramarital activities, now facing a scenario that could end his presidential campaign before it truly began. The FBI already had files on his affairs. J. Edgar Hoover, the FBI director, collected information on powerful people as insurance, as leverage. If Hoover knew about this pregnancy, he would own JFK. The presidency would come with strings attached, with blackmail implicit in every decision. According to the explosive allegations, JFK's response was not joy or support but political calculation. He couldn't afford this baby. He couldn't afford the scandal. His campaign, his family's ambitions, his place in history, all of it depended on this problem going away quietly and completely. So he allegedly urged Marilyn, perhaps pleaded with her, to terminate the pregnancy. For the good of his campaign. For the sake of his political future. For the preservation of the image America had of the Kennedy family. Think about what that must have done to Marilyn. This woman who wanted so desperately to be loved, to be valued for more than her body, to be seen as a whole person rather than a fantasy. The man she had been involved with for years, the man whose baby she was carrying, was asking her to eliminate that baby to protect his ambitions. Not offering to support her. Not promising to take care of her. Not acknowledging any responsibility. Just asking her to make this inconvenient reality disappear. Late summer 1960. Marilyn traveled to Nevada to begin filming The Misfits. The screenplay was written by Arthur Miller as a gift for her, a final gesture from their dying marriage. The film would also star Clark Gable, Montgomery Clift, and Eli Wallach. It was supposed to be Marilyn's transition to serious dramatic acting, the role that would finally earn her the respect she craved. But she arrived on set already falling apart. The heat in the Nevada desert was brutal. The production was chaotic. And Marilyn was still pregnant, still trying to decide what to do, still hoping perhaps that JFK would change his mind and choose her. 10 days into filming, Marilyn was hospitalized. The official story was exhaustion. She was known for being difficult on set, arriving late, requiring multiple takes, struggling with her lines. Exhaustion seemed plausible. The press reported it without question. But according to multiple sources who claim knowledge of what really happened, exhaustion was a cover story. Marilyn Monroe was hospitalized for 10 days to undergo a secret abortion. The pregnancy that could have destroyed JFK's presidential campaign was terminated in a Nevada hospital while the cast and crew of The Misfits waited for their star to return. Think about the logistics of arranging something like this in 1960. Abortion was illegal across most of the United States. Women died from back-alley procedures performed by unqualified practitioners in unsafe conditions. But Marilyn had access to the best doctors money could buy. And more importantly, she had JFK's political machine behind her. The Kennedy family had unlimited resources and connections. If they needed a discreet doctor, a private hospital, complete confidentiality, they could make it happen. They could make anything happen. Marilyn returned to the set of The Misfits after her hospitalization, but she was never the same. Cast and crew noticed the change. She was more fragile, more medicated, more disconnected from reality. She struggled to remember her lines. She missed entire days of shooting. The production became increasingly difficult and expensive. Director John Huston, dealing with his own alcoholism and gambling debts, grew frustrated. Clark Gable, the legendary leading man making his final film, tried to be patient but couldn't hide his irritation at the constant delays. What nobody on that set knew, according to these allegations, was that Marilyn was grieving. She had lost another baby. But this time it wasn't a miscarriage she could blame on fate or medical complications. This was a choice she had been pressured into making. An abortion arranged to protect a man who had used her and discarded her like so many men before him. She had sacrificed her chance at motherhood for JFK's political ambitions. And what did she get in return? Nothing. He moved on to other women. The campaign continued. And Marilyn was left alone in the Nevada desert, filming a movie about misfits and people who don't belong, drowning in pills and alcohol and the weight of what she had done. The Misfits wrapped in November 1960. JFK was elected president a few days later, on November 8. He would be inaugurated on January 20, 1961, the youngest elected president in American history. Beautiful Jackie stood beside him as First Lady. The world celebrated the beginning of Camelot. And Marilyn watched from the sidelines, knowing she had played a role in getting him there, a role nobody would ever acknowledge or appreciate. Clark Gable died of a heart attack on November 16, 1960, just days after filming ended. He was only 59. Some blamed the physical demands of the film, particularly the stunt work he insisted on doing himself. Others noted the stress of the chaotic production. Marilyn, consumed with guilt and grief, allegedly blamed herself. If she hadn't been so difficult on set, if the production hadn't dragged on for so long, maybe Gable would still be alive. Another loss. Another person gone. Another reason to reach for the pills. But Marilyn Monroe was not done with the Kennedy family. And they were not done with her. Despite everything that had happened, despite the abortion and the betrayal and the clear message that she was a political liability, Marilyn still believed she had a connection to JFK. She still called him. Still reached out through intermediaries. Still hoped that somehow they might be together now that he was president and she was free of Arthur Miller. It was delusional, perhaps, but Marilyn had never been good at protecting herself from men who used her. And then Robert Kennedy entered the picture. Bobby. The president's younger brother and attorney general. Handsome, intense, politically ambitious in his own right. Initially, Bobby's role was to manage the Marilyn problem. She was calling the White House too much. Making herself too visible. Threatening the discretion that JFK's affairs required. Bobby was sent to convince Marilyn to back off, to let JFK go, to accept that whatever they had was over. But somewhere in those conversations something shifted. According to multiple sources, Bobby and Marilyn began their own affair. The president's brother. Another Kennedy. Another powerful man who saw Marilyn as available and exploitable. May 19, 1962. Madison Square Garden. A massive birthday celebration for President Kennedy, who would turn 45 days later. The event was a Democratic fundraiser, a star-studded celebration of Camelot. And Marilyn Monroe was invited to perform. Jackie Kennedy, notably, was not in attendance. She was in Virginia with her children, hosting a barbecue for her parents. Some say she refused to attend because she suspected what would happen. Others claim she simply had no interest in watching her husband be serenaded by his alleged mistress. Marilyn arrived at the garden late as usual. She was sewn into a sheer, flesh-colored gown covered in rhinestones, so tight and revealing that she couldn't wear underwear beneath it. She was introduced by Peter Lawford, who famously called her, the late Marilyn Monroe, after she kept the audience waiting. And then she stepped into the spotlight and sang "Happy Birthday, Mr. President," in that breathy, sultry voice that made it sound less like a children's song and more like a seduction. The moment was electric and uncomfortable and impossible to look away from. JFK sat in the audience grinning, clearly enjoying the attention despite the inappropriateness. The entire world could see the chemistry between them. Jackie's absence suddenly made perfect sense. This was not how you sing "Happy Birthday" to a president you barely know. This was intimate. Sexual. A public declaration of private feelings. Marilyn was claiming JFK in front of thousands of people, in front of cameras broadcasting the moment to millions more. She was making their connection undeniable. But according to shocking allegations detailed in investigative reports and private investigator files, something even more explosive happened that night. Witnesses claimed they saw both Kennedy brothers with Marilyn. Oscar-winning actress Shirley MacLaine, who attended the after-party at Arthur Krim's home, later wrote in her memoir that she witnessed JFK emerge from a bedroom where Marilyn had been waiting, only for Bobby Kennedy to immediately enter. Both brothers. One woman. The same night. If true, it speaks to an astonishing level of entitlement and lack of boundaries. Marilyn wasn't a person to them. She was a plaything to be shared. Author Maureen Callahan, in her book about the Kennedy family, goes even further. She alleges that Bobby had sex with Marilyn in her dressing room just 30 minutes before she took the stage to sing "Happy Birthday." That Marilyn was intoxicated and flushed from the encounter when she performed. That JFK sat in the audience knowing his brother had just been with her, knowing she was obsessed with Bobby now, knowing the whole situation was spiraling dangerously out of control. After that night, everything changed. Jackie Kennedy, humiliated and furious, allegedly demanded that JFK end all contact with Marilyn. The Secret Service was instructed to never allow Marilyn access to the president again. Her calls to the White House were no longer put through. The door had been closed. Firmly. Finally. Marilyn Monroe had served her purpose and now she was being cut off. But Bobby was still in the picture. And according to explosive allegations that emerged decades after Marilyn's death, she became pregnant again in 1962. Not with JFK's child this time. With Bobby's. Another Kennedy pregnancy. Another impossible situation. Another secret that could destroy political careers and family legacies. The pattern was repeating, but this time with higher stakes. JFK was now president. Bobby was Attorney General, aggressively pursuing organized crime figures who had their own reasons to want leverage over the Kennedy family. The FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was watching everything. And Marilyn, damaged and desperate, was no longer willing to protect them. Private investigator Fred Otash's files, detailed in the book, The Fixer, paint a chilling picture of Marilyn's final months. Otash specialized in surveillance for Hollywood stars and politicians. He bugged homes and hotel rooms. He gathered compromising information for clients who wanted leverage or protection or ammunition for legal battles. And according to his files, Marilyn's home in Brentwood was bugged. Listening devices planted to monitor her conversations. But who ordered the surveillance? Who was listening? Some claim it was the FBI. Others suggest the mafia looking for dirt on the Kennedys. Still others believe it was the Kennedy family itself, monitoring Marilyn to ensure she didn't become a liability. What those listening devices allegedly captured in Marilyn's final weeks was explosive. Marilyn on the phone crying, talking about being pregnant. Marilyn raging about being used and discarded. Marilyn threatening to hold a press conference and reveal everything about her relationships with both Kennedy brothers. Marilyn confronting Bobby about forcing her to have another abortion. Another pregnancy terminated. Another baby that would never be born. Another piece of Marilyn Monroe's sacrifice to protect powerful men who saw her as disposable. Think about what Marilyn had endured by this point. 2 alleged pregnancies by Kennedy brothers. 2 alleged forced abortions. Years of being used sexually by the most powerful men in America. The humiliation of the Madison Square Garden performance, where she publicly declared feelings that would never be reciprocated. The rejection by JFK. The realization that Bobby was no different, that he too would use her and discard her when she became inconvenient. All while her career was struggling, her mental health was deteriorating, and her dependency on pills and alcohol was spiraling out of control. In the weeks before her death, Marilyn talked to friends about going public with her story. She was tired of being silenced. Tired of protecting men who wouldn't protect her. She had kept their secrets, terminated their babies, accepted their rejections, and maintained her silence. And what had it gotten her? Nothing but more pain and isolation. According to some accounts, she was planning a press conference. She was going to tell the world about her relationships with JFK and Bobby. She was going to expose the lie of Camelot, reveal the corruption and hypocrisy behind the shining Kennedy image. If true, this made Marilyn Monroe the most dangerous woman in America. The FBI had been monitoring her. J. Edgar Hoover had files on her relationships with the Kennedys, information he was holding as leverage over the president. The mafia, being aggressively prosecuted by Bobby Kennedy, would have loved to use Marilyn's story to destroy the Attorney General. The Kennedy family itself had every reason to silence her before she could speak. There were powerful forces circling Marilyn, all with their own interests in controlling the narrative. August 4, 1962. Marilyn's last day alive. The official story is well documented but full of inconsistencies and suspicious gaps. Marilyn spent the morning at her home in Brentwood. Her housekeeper, Eunice Murray, was there as she often was. Marilyn made phone calls. She spoke to her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, who visited her that afternoon. She talked to friends, including Peter Lawford. But other accounts suggest something much more dramatic happened that day. According to explosive allegations, Bobby Kennedy was in Los Angeles on August 4. He allegedly visited Marilyn at her home. Witnesses claim to have seen him there. And what happened during that visit, according to private investigator Fred Otash's files, was a confrontation. Marilyn was angry, distraught, demanding that Bobby take responsibility for the abortion he had allegedly forced her to have. She threatened again to go public, to destroy his career and his brother's legacy. The argument was loud enough for neighbors to hear, though they didn't understand what was being discussed. Bobby allegedly left in a rage. And hours later, Marilyn Monroe was dead. Her housekeeper called Dr. Greenson in the early hours of August 5, saying Marilyn's bedroom door was locked and she wasn't responding. When they broke in, Marilyn was lying naked on her bed, the phone clutched in one hand, empty pill bottles on the nightstand. She was 36 years old. The official cause of death was acute barbiturate poisoning, with a mode of probable suicide. But questions emerged immediately and have never been satisfactorily answered. Why did it take hours for the police to be called? The timeline provided by Eunice Murray and Dr. Greenson kept changing, with crucial hours unaccounted for. Why was Marilyn's house cleaned before police arrived, with the washing machine running and evidence potentially destroyed? Where was the drinking glass she would have needed to swallow all those pills? Why was there no residue of pills in her stomach during the autopsy, suggesting the barbiturates entered her system some other way? Why were her phone records from that night confiscated and never released? Why was there no proper investigation of Bobby Kennedy's whereabouts, despite multiple witnesses placing him at Marilyn's house that day? Joe DiMaggio, Marilyn's second husband and the man who never stopped loving her, reportedly blamed the Kennedys for her death. He barred all of them from her funeral, making clear where he believed responsibility lay. For the rest of his life, DiMaggio remained convinced that Marilyn had been murdered, that powerful forces had silenced her before she could reveal secrets that would have changed American history. Conspiracy theories have proliferated for 60 years. Some claim the FBI or CIA killed Marilyn to protect the presidency. Others suggest the mafia arranged her death to embarrass the Kennedys or eliminate a potential witness to their connections with the administration. Still others believe it was the Kennedy family itself, operating through proxies to eliminate a woman who had become an unacceptable liability. And some, looking at the evidence of her deteriorating mental health and long history of pill dependency, believe it truly was suicide, a tragic end for a troubled woman who had suffered too much for too long. What we know for certain is that Marilyn Monroe died with secrets. Secrets about the Kennedys. Secrets about pregnancies and abortions. Secrets about power and exploitation and the disposability of women who get too close to powerful men. And those secrets died with her, protected by a system that had every interest in maintaining the Camelot myth. The declassified FBI files that have emerged in recent years offer tantalizing hints about what the government knew. Memos reference Marilyn's relationships with JFK and Bobby. Documents suggest awareness of potential scandals being contained. Files indicate surveillance and monitoring. But the most explosive details remain classified or redacted. The full truth, whatever it is, remains hidden behind black marker lines and national security justifications. Think about what it means that we're still discovering new information about Marilyn Monroe's death 60 years later. That FBI files are still being declassified. That witnesses who stayed silent for decades finally came forward before their own deaths to share what they knew. That private investigator files sat in storage for years before being revealed. The story keeps growing, keeps getting darker, keeps suggesting that what happened to Marilyn Monroe was more complicated and sinister than a simple suicide. And at the center of it all are those alleged pregnancies. Those babies who were never born. A child who might have been the president's son or daughter, terminated in a Nevada hospital during the filming of The Misfits. Another child who might have been the attorney general's, aborted weeks before Marilyn's death. If these allegations are true and the evidence is circumstantial but compelling, then Marilyn Monroe sacrificed her deepest desire, motherhood, twice for men who gave her nothing in return. She wanted children so desperately. She talked about it constantly to friends and colleagues. She had suffered miscarriages in her marriages to DiMaggio and Miller, heartbreaks that left her feeling defective and unworthy. When she became pregnant with JFK's child, it must have seemed like a miracle and a curse simultaneously. Finally, a baby. But with the wrong man at the wrong time. And instead of supporting her, instead of taking responsibility, the Kennedy machine allegedly forced her to eliminate the problem. The second pregnancy, if it happened, would have been even more devastating. Marilyn knew by then that Bobby would never leave his wife Ethel for her. She knew the Kennedys saw her as expendable. She knew another abortion was coming, that once again she would lose a baby to protect powerful men's careers. No wonder she threatened to go public. No wonder she was angry and desperate and willing to destroy Camelot. They had taken everything from her, including the children she would never have. Now imagine being one of those babies. Never born. Never given a chance at life because your existence threatened political ambitions. A Kennedy child who never got to carry that famous name, never got to be part of that dynasty, never got to exist because you were inconvenient. Your mother was Marilyn Monroe, the most famous woman in the world. Your father was either the President or the Attorney General of the United States. You might have been raised in the White House or grown up to pursue your own path. But you never had that choice. Your life was terminated before it began, decided by people who valued power over your potential. And think about Marilyn, dying alone in her bedroom at 36, clutching a phone, surrounded by pill bottles. In her final moments, did she think about those babies? Did she regret the abortions she'd been pressured into? Did she wonder what her life might have been like if she'd kept one of those pregnancies, if she'd had the courage to go public, to demand that Kennedy take responsibility, to choose motherhood over their political convenience? Or was she so medicated, so far gone, that she couldn't think clearly about anything anymore? The tragedy of Marilyn Monroe goes beyond her death. It's about a life of exploitation that started in childhood and never really ended. She was sexually abused in foster care as a child. She was married off at 16 to escape the system. She was molded into a sex symbol by Hollywood executives who saw her as a commodity. She was used by powerful men who took what they wanted and gave nothing back. She tried so hard to be taken seriously, to be seen as an artist and intellectual, but the world only wanted the blonde bombshell. And when she became pregnant by men who couldn't afford the scandal, she was forced to eliminate those pregnancies to protect their reputations. The FBI files that have been declassified paint a picture of a woman under surveillance, monitored by the government because of her relationships with the Kennedys. J. Edgar Hoover knew about the affairs. He had documented them, filed them away, kept them as leverage. When Marilyn died, those files noted her death but revealed little about what the FBI knew regarding the pregnancies and abortions. The most damaging information remains classified, hidden behind national security protocols that prevent the full truth from emerging. Think about why those files are still classified 60 years later. JFK was assassinated in 1963. Bobby was assassinated in 1968. Jackie died in 1994. Most of the major players in this drama are dead. Their children and grandchildren carry the Kennedy legacy, but they weren't responsible for what happened in 1960 and 1962. So why keep files classified? What information could possibly still be too sensitive to release? Unless it's information that would fundamentally change how we understand American history. Unless it's proof of crimes committed at the highest levels of government. Unless it's evidence that Marilyn Monroe's death was not suicide but murder, arranged to silence a woman who knew too much. The mafia connection adds another layer to this dark story. The Kennedy family had ties to organized crime going back to Joseph Kennedy Sr.'s bootlegging days during Prohibition. Those connections allegedly helped JFK win crucial votes in the 1960 election, particularly in Chicago where mafia influence could sway outcomes. But once Bobby became Attorney General, he launched aggressive prosecutions against the very crime families that had helped elect his brother. It was a betrayal that the mafia didn't forget or forgive. Sam Giancana, the Chicago mob boss, had his own alleged affair with a woman who was also connected to JFK through Frank Sinatra. The entanglements between the Kennedys, Hollywood, and organized crime created a web of compromising relationships and mutual leverage. Marilyn existed in that web, connected to everyone, vulnerable to everyone. If she went public with what she knew about the Kennedys, she might also expose other connections, other secrets. The mafia had as much reason as anyone to want her silenced. Witnesses over the years have come forward with pieces of the puzzle. Peter Lawford, JFK's brother-in-law, reportedly confessed on his deathbed that he knew more than he ever said publicly. Eunice Murray, Marilyn's housekeeper, changed her story multiple times and admitted decades later that she had lied about aspects of that night. Neighbors reported seeing cars and people at Marilyn's house during the hours when the official story claimed she was alone. Phone records disappeared. Evidence was lost or destroyed. Every suspicious element was explained away or ignored. The autopsy itself raised questions that were never adequately answered. Dr. Thomas Noguchi, who performed the examination, found high levels of barbiturates in Marilyn's blood but very little in her stomach. If she had swallowed all those pills orally, there should have been residue and damage to her digestive system. The lack of such evidence suggested the drugs entered her system through another route. Perhaps injection. Perhaps a suppository. Perhaps forcibly administered by someone else. Dr. Noguchi couldn't rule out murder based on his findings, but the official conclusion was still probable suicide. Think about the timing of Marilyn's death. Just weeks after allegedly confronting Bobby Kennedy about a forced abortion. Days after threatening to hold a press conference revealing her relationships with both Kennedy brothers. Mere months after her humiliating "Happy Birthday, Mr. President" performance made their connection undeniable to the world. She died exactly when she became too dangerous to allow to live, when her silence could no longer be guaranteed, when she was ready to destroy Camelot regardless of the personal cost. And what happened after her death? The Kennedy family distanced themselves completely. They never publicly acknowledged any relationship beyond casual acquaintance. JFK and Bobby continued their careers as though Marilyn had never existed. The press, largely protective of the Kennedys in that era, didn't push too hard on uncomfortable questions. Marilyn was buried, and with her went the secrets. For decades the official story held. Tragic suicide of a troubled starlet. Nothing more. But secrets have a way of surfacing. Biographers researched. Witnesses eventually talked. Files were declassified. Technology allowed people to examine old evidence with new tools. And gradually, piece by piece, a different story emerged. A story of exploitation and betrayal. Of forced abortions and disposable women. Of powerful men who used and discarded someone vulnerable. Of a system that protected predators and blamed victims. Those babies, if they existed, would be in their 60s now. They would have lived through the 60s and 70s, through cultural revolutions and wars and technological change. They might have known they were Kennedy children, or they might have grown up never knowing their true parentage. But they never got that chance. They were eliminated before they could draw breath, before they could become problems, before they could threaten carefully constructed political images. Marilyn wanted to be a mother more than she wanted fame. She would have given up movies to raise children. She talked about it with friends, imagining a quiet life away from Hollywood, caring for babies who would finally give her life meaning. But she never got that life. Every pregnancy ended in loss, either through miscarriage or forced termination. And when she died alone and childless, her deepest desire unfulfilled, her body having betrayed her or been betrayed by others one final time. The legacy of what happened to Marilyn Monroe extends far beyond her own tragedy. It's a cautionary tale about power imbalances and exploitation. About how powerful men use women and discard them. About how systems protect the powerful at the expense of the vulnerable. About how inconvenient truths get buried literally and figuratively. Marilyn's story is every woman who was pressured into an abortion she didn't want. Every woman who was promised love and given only exploitation. Every woman who tried to speak her truth and was silenced. The FBI files continue to trickle out, each declassification revealing a little more. Recent releases confirmed that the FBI was monitoring Marilyn's relationships with the Kennedys. That Hoover had specific knowledge of the affairs. That there were concerns at the highest levels about potential political fallout. But the most explosive documents, the ones that might confirm or deny the pregnancy allegations, remain classified. Access denied. National security. Protect and defend. The same language used to hide countless other government secrets. What would those complete, unredacted files reveal? Would they confirm that Marilyn was pregnant twice by Kennedy men? Would they document the abortions? Would they show that the government knew Marilyn was planning to go public and took steps to prevent it? Would they prove murder instead of suicide? Or would they show that despite all the conspiracy theories and speculation, Marilyn Monroe really did take her own life in a moment of despair, and there's no deeper mystery to solve? We may never know. The people who could answer definitively are dead. The Kennedy family remains powerful and protective of their legacy. The government continues to classify documents that might prove embarrassing or damaging to institutional reputation. And Marilyn remains frozen in time, forever 36, forever the blonde bombshell, forever denied the complexity and tragedy of her full story. But those babies deserve to be remembered, even if they never existed beyond a few weeks of cellular development in Marilyn's womb. They deserved better than to be treated as problems to solve, obstacles to remove, inconveniences to eliminate. They deserved a father who would claim them and a mother who could raise them and a world that would let them exist. Instead they got nothing. Not even their stories told until decades after their potential births, when fragments of truth finally emerged from classified files and witness accounts and investigative research. Marilyn Monroe died believing she was worthless. Despite her fame, despite being desired by millions, despite her beauty and talent, she couldn't escape the feeling that she was disposable. And the Kennedy family proved her right. They used her and discarded her. They impregnated her and forced her to abort. They silenced her in life and erased her from their history after death. She was worth less to them than their political ambitions. Her babies were worth less than avoiding scandal. This is the secret that allegedly got Marilyn Monroe killed. Not just the affairs, though those were scandalous enough, but the pregnancies, the forced abortions, the children who were never born because they threatened to expose the rot beneath Camelot's shining surface. The FBI knew. The mafia knew. The Kennedy family knew. And now, slowly, the world knows too. 60 years too late to save Marilyn. 60 years too late to give those babies a chance at life. But not too late to finally tell the truth. Not too late to say their names. Not too late to acknowledge what was done and who was harmed. Not too late for Marilyn Monroe's story to finally be heard in its full, tragic, devastating complexity.